I pushed open my front door at 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, expecting the usual silence of my empty Victorian home in Sacramento. Instead, I heard voices upstairs and the unmistakable sound of paint rollers against walls. My heart pounded as I climbed the hardwood stairs, each step echoing through the hallway my grandmother had walked for 40 years before leaving me this house. The master bedroom door stood wide open, revealing chaos that made my blood run cold. Professional painters in white coveralls were transforming my cream-colored sanctuary into sage green. Drop cloths covered my antique furniture. Paint fumes filled the air I breathed every morning. Standing in the center of my personal space, directing workers like she owned the place, was my sister-in-law, Stephanie. "We're renovating it before moving in," Stephanie announced cheerfully when she spotted me frozen in the doorway. Her blonde ponytail bounced as she gestured toward the half-painted walls with the confidence of someone who belonged there. My brother Marcus emerged from my walk-in closet, nodding agreement while avoiding my stunned expression. Behind them, my parents, Janet and Robert, appeared in the hallway carrying coffee cups and wearing satisfied smiles like they were watching a home improvement show. Moving in where I managed to croak, though the sinking feeling in my stomach already knew the answer. "Here, of course," Stephanie laughed, patting her rounded belly beneath a flowered maternity top. "The guest room is way too cramped for our growing family. We need space for the new nursery, and this room is perfect." The painters continued working as if family drama was part of their daily routine. One older man with gray stubble dipped his roller methodically, apparently deaf to the conversation exploding around him. Another younger worker focused intensely on cutting precise lines along the crown molding, pretending not to notice my mounting panic. Marcus finally met my eyes, his jaw set in that stubborn expression I remembered from childhood arguments. "Dolores, we talked about this being temporary, but things have changed. Stephanie's pregnancy has complications, and we can't keep bouncing between apartments while house hunting." "House hunting," I repeated, my voice climbing higher. "You mean the house hunting you've been doing for 6 months while living in my guest room?" My mother stepped forward, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the afternoon hour. "Honey, family helps family. Marcus is going through a difficult transition, and Stephanie needs stability for the baby's health." Transition. The word felt foreign on my tongue. He lost his job at the software company. That's not a transition, that's unemployment. My father cleared his throat, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses in the way that always preceded his reasonable but firm voice. "Dolores, you have this entire house to yourself. It's selfish to hoard space when your brother's family needs security." I walked deeper into my bedroom, surveying the damage to my sanctuary. The painters had moved my jewelry box to make room for paint cans. My grandmother's quilt lay folded on a chair instead of spread across the bed where it belonged. Stephanie's prenatal vitamins sat on my nightstand next to a baby name book I'd never seen before. "When did you decide this?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. Stephanie and Marcus exchanged a glance that lasted too long, the kind of wordless communication that happens between people who've rehearsed a conversation. "We've been discussing options for weeks," Stephanie said smoothly. "The guest room works fine for sleeping, but we need the master suite for practical reasons. The attached bathroom, the extra closet space room for a crib." "A crib?" I stared at her in disbelief. "You're planning to put a baby in my bedroom?" "Our bedroom," Marcus corrected quietly. The casual way he said "our" hit me like a slap. This wasn't a request or even a discussion. This was a fait accompli presented with painters and parental approval as supporting evidence. I looked around my childhood sanctuary, the room where I'd recovered from heartbreaks, celebrated promotions, and mourned my grandmother's passing just 2 years earlier. "Where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" I asked. "The guest room is perfectly comfortable," my mother replied. "You're single Dolores. You don't need all this space." The logic felt twisted, but I couldn't articulate why. 6 months ago, I'd offered Marcus and Stephanie temporary housing after his layoff, thinking it would last maybe 2 months. They'd moved 2 suitcases into the guest room and promised to find their own place quickly. Now I was discovering they'd apparently been planning a permanent takeover. "How long have you been planning this renovation?" I asked the painters directly. The older man paused his rolling. "Lady hired us last week said it was a surprise for her sister-in-law." Stephanie's cheeks flushed pink. "I wanted it to be a beautiful reveal when we officially moved in." Moved in. I felt like I was speaking a foreign language. "This is my house." "Technically, yes," Marcus said. "But we're family. We're not strangers you'd charge rent to." The word "technically" hung in the air like the paint fumes, toxic and impossible to ignore. I'd inherited this house specifically because I'd been my grandmother's caregiver during her final illness. She'd chosen me deliberately, knowing I'd preserve the home's character and memories. Now my own family was treating that inheritance like community property. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant asking about tomorrow's client meetings. The normal world of financial planning and investment portfolios felt impossibly distant from this surreal domestic coup happening in my bedroom. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "What's to think about?" my father asked. "It's the right thing to do." As I retreated downstairs, I heard Stephanie telling the painters to continue with the second coat. The sound of rollers against walls followed me through the house like a countdown timer, marking the minutes until my personal space disappeared completely. The next morning, I attempted what I thought would be a reasonable adult conversation over coffee in my kitchen. Marcus sat at the breakfast table reading news on his phone, while Stephanie buttered toast with the methodical precision of someone who'd made herself completely at home. Their 4-year-old daughter, Emma, played with blocks on the floor, building towers and knocking them down with delighted giggles. "We need to discuss boundaries." I began pouring coffee into my favorite mug, a ceramic piece my grandmother had painted during a pottery class. Stephanie looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "Of course we want to be considerate housemates." Housemates. I set my mug down harder than intended. "This is my house, Stephanie. Your guests." Her face crumpled, immediately tears welling up in a way that seemed both genuine and perfectly timed. "I'm sorry, Dolores. The pregnancy hormones make me emotional. I just meant we want to be good family members." Marcus reached across the table to take her hand. "The stress isn't good for the baby, Dolores. The doctor said Stephanie needs a calm, stable environment." "Stable environment," I repeated. "She's crying because I called her a guest in my own home." "You're being hostile," Marcus said, his voice taking on the patient tone he'd perfected during childhood to make me look unreasonable. "We're not trying to take anything away from you." Before I could respond, the front door opened and my parents walked in without knocking, carrying grocery bags and wearing bright smiles. This casual entry into my home, once unthinkable, had apparently become normal during the 6 months of my family's gradual invasion. "Morning, everyone," my mother called out, setting bags on my counter and immediately beginning to unpack items I hadn't requested. "I brought ingredients for pot roast tonight." "Mom, you don't need to cook here," I said. "Nonsense, Stephanie shouldn't be on her feet too much, and Marcus has been working so hard on his consulting business." I paused my coffee mug halfway to my lips. "Consulting business." Marcus cleared his throat. "I've been developing client relationships, building a network. It takes time to establish steady income." "What kind of consulting?" I pressed. "I had solutions for small businesses," he said vaguely. "I'm using my experience from the software company to help local entrepreneurs optimize their systems." Stephanie jumped in quickly. "He's been meeting with potential clients all week. It's very promising." My father settled into a chair with the newspaper spreading it out like he'd been reading breakfast news at my table for years. "Marcus has always been entrepreneurial. Remember his lawn mowing business in high school?" "That lasted 1 summer," I pointed out. "Because he got a better job at the computer store." My mother defended pulling carrots and potatoes from the grocery bags. "He's always been ambitious." I excused myself to get ready for work, but stopped in the hallway when I heard Stephanie's voice drop to a whisper. "She's being really difficult about this," Stephanie said. "I'm worried the stress will affect my blood pressure." "Give her time," Marcus replied. "She's always needed to process change slowly." But we can't wait much longer, my mother added. The contractor needs to know about the bathroom expansion by Friday. Bathroom expansion. I crept closer to the kitchen doorway. The guest bathroom is too small for a family, my father explained. If we're going to make this arrangement work long term, we need proper facilities. How long term are we talking? Stephanie asked. Well, with property values the way they are, it might take 2 or 3 years to save for a down payment, Marcus said. Maybe longer if we want to find something in a good school district. 2 or 3 years. The timeline hit me like cold water. This wasn't temporary housing during a brief unemployment period. This was a multi-year plan to reorganize my life around their needs, funded by my mortgage payments and utility bills. I grabbed my purse and headed for work, my mind spinning with the implications of what I'd overheard. At my office, I tried to focus on reviewing retirement portfolios for elderly clients, but kept thinking about bathroom expansions and school districts. During lunch, I drove back home to collect files I'd forgotten planning to slip in and out quickly. The house felt different during the day, like a stage set between performances. I headed upstairs for my documents and stopped cold outside the guest room. The door stood open, revealing a space I barely recognized. Marcus and Stephanie's belongings had multiplied exponentially. The closet overflowed with clothes, including winter coats and formal wear that suggested permanent residence rather than temporary storage. A second crib, still in its box, leaned against one wall. Children's toys covered the floor in colorful chaos. But it was my master bedroom that truly shocked me. The painting was complete, transforming my peaceful cream sanctuary into something that looked like a nursery showroom. Stephanie had hung yellow curtains instead of my white ones. A changing table occupied the corner where my reading chair used to sit. My grandmother's antique mirror had been replaced by a modern piece with child safety features. On my dresser, I found a stack of papers that made my hands shake. Home improvement store receipts totaling over $800 charged to a credit card I'd never seen before. Paintbrushes, baby furniture, bathroom fixtures, cabinet hardware. At the bottom of the stack, a business card from a contractor specializing in bathroom renovations. My phone rang, displaying my mother's number. "Dolores, honey, are you home? I thought I heard your car." Just picking up some files, I called downstairs. "Perfect timing. Can you come down? We need to discuss the renovation timeline." I found my entire family assembled in my living room like a board meeting I hadn't been invited to join. My parents sat on the couch with clipboards and calculators. Marcus hunched over his laptop at my coffee table, surrounded by printed emails. Stephanie reclined in my grandmother's favorite armchair feet, elevated on an ottoman, scrolling through her phone with the contentment of someone planning her future. "We've been researching contractors and getting estimates," my father announced, consulting his clipboard. "The bathroom expansion will cost about $12,000, but we can spread it over 6 months if we use the right financing." Financing I managed. "Home equity line of credit," Marcus explained without looking up from his laptop. "The house has plenty of value to support it, and monthly payments would be minimal." "My house," I corrected, "my equity." "Technically, yes," Stephanie said, using that word again. "But since we're all living here, it benefits everyone." "I'm not living here," I protested. "You are, in my house." My mother's expression grew stern. "Dolores, this attitude isn't healthy. Family means sharing resources and supporting each other." Sharing resources. The words came out sharper than I intended. I'm paying the mortgage, utilities, insurance, property taxes, and now apparently groceries and home improvements. What exactly are you sharing? Marcus finally looked up from his laptop. "We're sharing our presence, our love, our commitment to making this work for everyone. Your presence costs me $800 in credit card charges I didn't authorize." "Those were household improvements," Stephanie said quickly, "necessary updates that benefit the property value." Property value for whom? The question hung in the air, finally naming the tension that had been building for months. My family exchanged glances that confirmed they'd been having conversations without me making plans that affected my life without consulting my preferences. For all of us, my mother said firmly, family decisions should be made collectively. As I drove back to work, I realized this was no longer about temporary housing or family help. This was about ownership control and the systematic erosion of my independence. The $800 in unauthorized charges were just the beginning. Friday morning, I announced I was leaving early for a client meeting in San Francisco, a 3-hour drive that would keep me away until evening. Instead, I parked around the corner and waited until my family settled into their normal daytime routine. At 10:30, I slipped through my back door and positioned myself in the pantry where I could hear kitchen conversations clearly. Stephanie was on the phone, her voice bright with excitement. "Sarah, you won't believe how perfectly this is working out. We're basically getting a free house." I pressed myself against the pantry wall, hardly breathing. "No, she has no idea," Stephanie continued. "Marcus researched all the tenant rights laws, and after 6 months of established residency, we have legal protections. She can't just throw us out anymore." My heart hammered against my ribs as Stephanie's voice grew more animated. "The best part, we've been documenting all our contributions to household expenses. Marcus registered his consulting business. Using this address, I've been getting mail here for months, and we've established clear patterns of shared living. Our lawyer friend says we could claim equity rights based on our investments in property improvements." I gripped the pantry doorframe to keep from stumbling. "She's so naive about legal stuff." Stephanie laughed. "She thinks because she inherited the house she has absolute control. But inheritance doesn't override tenant protections or domestic partnerships." Domestic partnerships? Stephanie's friend apparently asked the same question I was thinking. "Not literal partnerships," Stephanie clarified, "but legal precedent for family members who contribute to household maintenance gaining residency rights. Marcus found cases where siblings successfully claimed partial ownership after making improvements and paying household expenses." The kitchen fell quiet except for Stephanie's humming as she apparently organized something. I heard papers rustling, followed by more conversation. "We've been so smart about this," Stephanie continued. "Every home improvement store purchase every utility payment contribution, every grocery receipt. We're building a paper trail that shows we're invested partners in maintaining this property, not temporary guests." I heard Marcus's voice joining the conversation as he apparently entered the kitchen. "Hey babe, I just got off the phone with the contractor. He can start the bathroom expansion Monday if we sign the contract today." "Perfect," Stephanie replied. "Did you tell him about the payment arrangement?" "Home equity line of credit against the property value. I have all the paperwork ready for Dolores to sign. She just needs to understand this benefits everyone's living situation." "What if she refuses?" Marcus's laugh had an edge I'd never heard before. "She won't. She's too worried about family harmony to fight us on this. She's been conditioned since childhood to avoid conflict with mom and dad. And if she tries to evict us, can't. We've established legal residency, and Stephanie's pregnancy gives us additional protections against displacement. Plus, we've documented pattern of shared household responsibilities and financial contributions." I heard papers shuffling again. "Look at this," Marcus continued. 6 months of grocery receipts where we've contributed, utility payments where we've helped, home improvement purchases that enhanced property value. Any court would see we've been acting like co-owners, not temporary guests." "What about her emotional attachment to the house?" Stephanie asked. "That works in our favor. She won't want to create family drama or legal battles that could force a property sale. She'd rather compromise and let us stay than risk losing the house entirely through court proceedings." My hands were shaking as I listened to them dissect my psychology like amateur therapists planning an intervention. "The beauty is we never actually lied," Marcus continued. "We said we needed temporary help, and we do. We said we were house hunting and we are looking at options. We just never specified our timeline or criteria. Or mentioned that our criteria include finding something better than what we already have here," Stephanie added with a giggle. "Exactly. Why buy a smaller, more expensive house when we can gradually gain equity rights in a larger property that's already paid off I heard my mother's voice joining the conversation as she apparently arrived for another unannounced visit. "How's Dolores handling the bathroom renovation plans?" she asked. "She's adjusting," Marcus replied diplomatically. "Change is hard for her, but she'll see the benefits once construction starts." "I brought the paperwork from our financial advisor," my mother continued. "If Dolores adds you to the house title as co-owners, we can help with the down payment for your eventual house purchase. But honestly, with property values rising so fast, staying here might be the smartest financial decision." "How much down payment help?" Stephanie asked immediately. $15,000, maybe $20 if your father's retirement dividend comes through. I realized my parents weren't just enabling this takeover, they were financially invested in it. The down payment help was conditional on Marcus gaining ownership rights to my house, creating an incentive for them to pressure me into signing legal documents that would fundamentally alter my property rights. "When does she need to sign the title paperwork?" Marcus asked. "This week, ideally," my mother replied. "The equity line of credit requires all property owners to approve the loan, so we need her signature before construction begins." I listened to my family plan my financial future like they were discussing weekend dinner arrangements. The casual tone of their conversation made their betrayal even more chilling. This wasn't desperate people making poor decisions. This was calculated manipulation by relatives who'd researched legal strategies to steal my inheritance. As their conversation shifted to nursery decorating ideas, I slipped out through the back door and drove to my office in a daze. The pieces of their scheme were finally visible: establish residency, document financial contributions, create legal complications that would pressure me into signing ownership documents, then use my property's equity to fund their lifestyle, while gradually pushing me out of my own home. That afternoon, I called my grandmother's former attorney. Sunday dinner at my house had become a weekly tradition I'd never agreed to host. My mother arrived at 4 o'clock carrying her famous apple pie and a folder of legal documents she set beside her purse, like casual reading material. My father followed with a bottle of wine and his reassuring smile that usually preceded difficult conversations. Marcus and Stephanie emerged from their afternoon nap looking refreshed and united, while I felt like I'd been awake for weeks. "Before we eat, we should discuss the house situation," my mother announced, settling into my grandmother's dining chair with the authority of someone calling a board meeting to order. "We've been putting this off too long." I looked around my dining room table, feeling outnumbered and ambushed. Emma played quietly in the living room with toys that seemed to multiply daily, creating a domestic atmosphere that made my objections seem selfish and unreasonable. "I've been thinking about everything." I began carefully, and I'm not comfortable with permanent changes to the house without more discussion. Stephanie's eyes immediately filled with tears. "What do you mean by permanent changes?" "The bathroom renovation, the title paperwork, treating my master bedroom like it belongs to you." "Belongs to us," Marcus corrected. "We're family. This should be our shared home." My father opened the folder and spread documents across the table between the dinner plates my grandmother had collected over 40 years of hosting family meals. These papers would formalize everyone's contributions and responsibilities. It's actually protection for you, Dolores, ensuring you're not bearing all the financial burden alone. I picked up the top document and felt my stomach drop. "This is a quitclaim deed transferring half ownership to Marcus." "Joint ownership," my mother clarified. "You'd still retain 50% equity while sharing the responsibilities of property maintenance and mortgage payments." "Mortgage payments." I stared at her. "The house is paid off. Grandmother left it to me free and clear." "But you'll need financing for the renovations," Stephanie said through her tears. "The bathroom expansion kitchen updates may be a second-story addition for more bedrooms. These improvements would benefit both families." Both families. The phrase felt like a trap. I'm not married. I don't have children. I'm one person living in a house sized for a family. "Exactly our point," my father said gently. "You have more space than you need while Marcus's family is cramped and struggling. Sharing makes economic and emotional sense." I looked at Marcus, searching for some sign of the brother who'd once helped me build blanket forts and defended me from schoolyard bullies. Instead, I saw a stranger wearing his face, nodding agreement with every word that undermined my independence. "What about my privacy?" I asked. "My right to live in the house I inherited." "You'd still live here," Marcus said. "We'd all live here together like an extended family compound. Lots of cultures do this successfully." "Cultures where everyone agrees to the arrangement," I pointed out. Stephanie's crying intensified, and she pressed her hands to her rounded belly. "The stress of uncertainty isn't good for the baby. My doctor says I need stability and security during the 3rd trimester. Maybe I should call your doctor," I suggested. "Explain the actual living situation and get professional advice about pregnancy stress." "That's not necessary," my mother interjected quickly. "We all want what's best for Stephanie and the baby." "And what's best for me?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and uncomfortable. My family exchanged glances that confirmed they'd discuss my well-being without consulting me about my own needs or preferences. "What's best for you is having family close by," my father said finally. "You work too much, you don't date enough, and you spend too many evenings alone in this big house. Having Marcus and Stephanie here gives you built-in companionship and shared responsibilities." I didn't ask for companionship or shared responsibilities. I like my privacy and independence. "You like isolation," my mother corrected. "There's a difference. Grandmother worried about you becoming too solitary after she passed." The mention of my grandmother felt like emotional manipulation, but it also stung because I missed her wisdom and guidance. She'd been the one family member who truly understood my need for quiet space and personal autonomy. "Grandmother left me this house because she trusted me to make my own decisions about it," I said. "She left it to you because she knew you'd take care of family," Stephanie said, her voice trembling. "She'd want you to help us during our time of need." I realized they were rewriting my grandmother's intentions to support their agenda. The woman who'd valued independence and self-reliance above almost everything else was being portrayed as someone who'd expect me to sacrifice my inheritance for relatives who'd never contributed to her care. "I need time to think about this," I said, pushing the legal documents away from my dinner plate. "How much time?" Marcus asked. "The contractor needs an answer by Tuesday, and Stephanie's due date is only 4 months away." "We've already been patient for weeks," my father added. "At some point, delay becomes selfishness." I looked at the faces around my table, people who were supposed to love and support me, and realized they'd already decided my future without me. The legal documents were a formality, not a negotiation. They'd moved into my house, changed my bedroom, planned renovations with my equity, and pressured me to formalize an arrangement that would fundamentally alter my life. "What if I say no?" I asked quietly. The silence that followed was more telling than any argument. My family had never considered the possibility that I might refuse their demands because they'd structured the situation to make refusal seem impossible. "You won't say no," my mother said confidently, "because you're not selfish, Dolores. You're generous and loving, and you understand that family comes first." As I cleared dinner plates while my family discussed renovation timelines in my living room, I realized they'd mistaken my kindness for weakness and my generosity for obligation. The documents on my table weren't about sharing resources. They were about transferring my inheritance to relatives who'd calculated exactly how to manipulate my emotions and exploit my desire for family harmony. That night, I lay in the guest bed listening to Marcus and Stephanie make plans for their future in my master bedroom. Their whispered conversations included discussions about tax benefits of property ownership, investment potential of home improvements, and timeline for their next baby, who would also need nursery space. I finally understood that my family's financial problems were deeper than Marcus's unemployment. They needed my house not just as temporary shelter, but as a permanent solution to debt and poor planning that preceded his job loss by years. My inheritance had become their retirement plan, and they'd orchestrated an elaborate manipulation to claim legal rights to property they'd never earned. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and prepared for reconnaissance. After my family left for various appointments, I conducted a systematic search of my own house, documenting evidence of their permanent takeover with the methodical precision I usually reserved for financial audits. The guest room revealed the scope of their deception. I photographed closets stuffed with seasonal clothing, children's furniture still in original packaging, and storage boxes labeled with my address. Under the bed, I found a folder containing apartment lease applications, all deliberately incomplete or submitted with unrealistic criteria that ensured rejection. Marcus's laptop bag carelessly left on the desk contained documentation that made my hands shake, printed emails between him and Stephanie discussing Operation Inheritance with the clinical detachment of military strategists, legal research about adverse possession laws, tenant rights and property ownership disputes, screenshots of real estate websites showing house prices they'd never be able to afford, with notes about playing the long game until my property could be transferred to their names. Most damning was a spreadsheet titled Equity Timeline that mapped their financial strategy month by month. It showed how they'd gradually increased their financial contributions to household expenses, not from generosity, but to establish legal claims of investment in property maintenance. Every grocery receipt, utility payment, and home improvement purchase had been calculated to build a paper trail supporting eventual ownership rights. I photographed everything with my phone, then replaced items exactly where I'd found them. In Stephanie's purse, I discovered business cards from 3 different real estate lawyers, all specializing in property disputes and family ownership conflicts. Handwritten notes on the cards included phrases like 6-month residency minimum and documented financial contributions required. The master bedroom had been completely transformed into their permanent space. I found mortgage refinancing applications in my name apparently prepared for my signature, without my knowledge. The applications requested cash-out refinancing that would provide them with $40,000 while adding substantial monthly payments to my financial obligations. In the kitchen, I discovered they'd been intercepting my mail systematically. A small box hidden behind cereal containers held 3 months of my bank statements, credit card offers, and insurance documents. They'd been monitoring my finances while planning their takeover, ensuring they understood my economic position better than I realized. The most chilling discovery was a notebook in Stephanie's handwriting detailing my daily routine's work schedule and emotional patterns. She'd been studying my behavior like a psychological profile, noting when I was most likely to avoid conflict, how I responded to family pressure, and which emotional triggers would make me comply with their demands. One entry read, "Dolores hates disappointing mom and dad. Use their approval as leverage. She won't fight if it means hurting family relationships. Pregnancy sympathy very effective. Emma's presence makes her feel guilty about denying family stability." Another page contained a timeline, month 1-2, establish routine presence, month 3-4, begin home improvements, month 5-6, legal residency established, month 7, present ownership papers during emotional crisis, month 8, complete property transfer. According to their timeline, we were currently in month 7. I left the house and drove to the coffee shop where Stephanie supposedly had prenatal appointments every Tuesday. At 2 o'clock, I watched through the window as she met with a man in an expensive suit who definitely wasn't a doctor. I recognized him from online research as Daniel Morrison, a real estate investor, known for flipping properties in gentrifying neighborhoods. I entered the coffee shop and sat 2 tables away pretending to read emails while listening to their conversation. The property appraisal came back at $480,000, Morrison was saying. After renovation costs, we're looking at $600,000 resale value within 18 months. "And our split?" Stephanie asked. "Standard arrangement. You deliver clear title, I handle renovation and sale. We split profit 60-40 after my costs. How quickly after we get ownership? I can close on the purchase within 30 days of clear title transfer. The beauty is your sister-in-law will never suspect. She'll think you're finally moving out to buy your own place." Stephanie giggled. She'll be so relieved to have her house back she won't ask questions about our sudden financial stability. The pregnancy timeline gives us perfect cover, Morrison continued. Emotional pressure about needing stability. Time pressure about the baby's arrival. Family pressure about doing the right thing. She'll sign ownership papers to avoid family conflict, then we'll offer to buy out her half at below market value. What if she refuses the buyout? Property dispute litigation. I have lawyers who specialize in making life miserable for stubborn co-owners. Most people sell rather than fight expensive court battles. I photographed them, discreetly captured their conversation on my phone's voice recorder, and documented the business papers spread across their table. The real estate investors folder contained professional photographs of my house, detailed renovation plans, and profit projections that treated my inheritance like a commodity to be harvested. When I got home, I called my grandmother's attorney and scheduled an emergency appointment. That evening, I pretended everything was normal during dinner, while my family discussed bathroom renovation details. Stephanie chatted excitedly about baby preparations, while secretly planning to sell my house to her investor partner. Marcus showed me contractor estimates while hiding spreadsheets that mapped my financial exploitation. As I lay in bed that night, I realized my family's betrayal was worse than theft. They'd studied my personality, exploited my emotions, and planned my displacement with the cold calculation of criminals. The pregnancy, the family pressure, the legal manipulation. Everything had been orchestrated to steal my grandmother's gift and profit from my trust. But now I had evidence of their conspiracy, and tomorrow I would begin fighting back. Tuesday morning, I made my move while Marcus was supposedly at client meetings and Stephanie was allegedly at prenatal yoga. Instead of going to work, I drove straight to the Sacramento Police Department with a folder of evidence that would shatter my family's carefully constructed lies. Detective Sarah Martinez listened to my recorded conversations, examined my photographs of intercepted mail, and reviewed the real estate fraud documents with growing interest. When I showed her Marcus's business registration using my address without permission and evidence of credit applications in my name, she nodded grimly. This is mail theft, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, she said. We need to move quickly before they can destroy evidence or complete the property transfer. At 11:30, I sat in my living room while Detective Martinez and Officer James Chen rang my doorbell. My parents had arrived for their daily check-in, and Marcus had returned from his supposed client meeting. Only Stephanie was missing, but her car was in the driveway. Sacramento Police Department. Detective Martinez announced as my father opened the door with confusion. We need to speak with Marcus Williams regarding allegations of mail theft and fraud. The transformation in my family was immediate and devastating. Marcus went pale. My mother gasped audibly, and my father stammered questions about what was happening. Stephanie emerged from the kitchen looking like she'd seen a ghost. What's this about? Marcus asked, his voice higher than usual. We have evidence that you've been intercepting mail addressed to Dolores Williams, using her address for unauthorized business registration and applying for credit in her name without permission, Detective Martinez explained. These are federal crimes. There's been a misunderstanding, my mother protested. This is family business, not criminal activity. Officer Chen produced the box of intercepted mail I'd photographed. This was found hidden in the kitchen during our search. Opening mail addressed to another person is mail theft regardless of family relationships. We live here, Stephanie said quickly. We have residency rights. Residency doesn't grant permission to steal mail or commit identity fraud, Detective Martinez replied. She turned to Marcus with handcuffs visible on her belt. We also have recorded conversations discussing real estate fraud and conspiracy to forge property ownership documents. The blood drained from Marcus's face. You recorded us. I recorded conversations in my own home, I said quietly, about plans to steal my property. My father looked between us with dawning horror. Dolores, what have you done? I've protected myself from criminals who happen to be related to me, I replied. Detective Martinez read Marcus his rights while my mother wept and demanded explanations I couldn't provide without revealing the depth of their betrayal. Stephanie began hyperventilating, clutching her pregnant belly, while insisting this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved through family discussion. The business registration shows clear intent to establish false residency, Officer Chen explained to my parents. The credit applications in Dolores's name constitute identity theft. The recorded conversations about property fraud demonstrate criminal conspiracy. They're trying to steal my house, I said simply. They've been planning this for months. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus's laptop contained the Operation Inheritance files. Stephanie's phone revealed text messages with the real estate investor discussing profit splits. The intercepted mail included bank statements they'd been using to monitor my finances. The fake legal documents showed clear intent to commit property fraud. "This can't be happening," my mother kept repeating. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal from each other," Detective Martinez said. "This is sophisticated fraud that could have cost Ms. Williams hundreds of thousands of dollars." As Marcus was handcuffed and placed in the police car, neighbors gathered on their front porches to witness the spectacle. The HOA president, Mrs. Chen, from next door approached cautiously to ask if everything was all right. "There's been some criminal activity involving property fraud," I explained. "It's being handled now." Stephanie collapsed into tears, confessing through sobs that the real estate investor had promised them enough money to buy their own house. "We never meant to hurt anyone," she wailed. "We just wanted financial security for our children." "By stealing my inheritance?" I asked. "It wasn't stealing," she protested. "It was sharing family resources." Detective Martinez documented Stephanie's confession while my parents sat in stunned silence. The scope of deception was finally visible: months of planning, legal research, emotional manipulation, and criminal activity, designed to transfer my property to relatives who'd never contributed to its value. "Will there be charges against Stephanie?" my mother asked weakly. "That depends on her cooperation and the extent of her involvement," Detective Martinez replied. "But conspiracy to commit fraud is a serious crime, regardless of pregnancy status." As police cars departed with Marcus in custody, my house felt different. The oppressive atmosphere of manipulation and lies was lifting, replaced by a strange sense of clarity. My parents sat on my couch, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen them, while Stephanie packed hastily upstairs with Emma, crying in confusion. "How could you call the police on your own brother?" my mother asked. "How could he try to steal my house?" I replied. The question hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. For months, I'd been gaslit into believing family loyalty meant accepting theft. Now the legal system was validating what my instincts had known all along. What my family called sharing was actually stealing, and what they called love was actually exploitation. 3 months later, I stood in my restored master bedroom watching the sunrise through windows that once again held my grandmother's white lace curtains. The sage green paint had been professionally removed and replaced with the original cream color that brought me peace. My antique mirror reflected a woman who looked older, but infinitely stronger than the confused person who discovered painters in her sanctuary last spring. Marcus had pleaded guilty to mail theft and identity fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence that included 18 months of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, and full restitution for all expenses related to their fraudulent scheme. The court ordered him to pay for property restoration legal fees and financial damages totaling nearly $15,000. His monthly restitution payments would continue for 3 years, ensuring he remembered the consequences of betraying family trust. Stephanie accepted a plea agreement that required her to testify against the real estate investor who'd orchestrated similar schemes throughout Sacramento County. Daniel Morrison was facing federal charges for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud involving 17 different properties. Stephanie's cooperation earned her probation instead of jail time, but she'd lost her nursing license and faced years of financial hardship rebuilding her credibility. My parents had been the hardest part of this journey. The revelation that their son was a criminal shattered their worldview and forced them into family therapy, where they confronted decades of enabling behavior that had taught Marcus he could manipulate his way out of any consequences. They'd initially blamed me for destroying family harmony, but gradually came to understand that protecting criminals wasn't love. It was enabling self-destruction. "I keep thinking we should have seen the signs," my mother said during one of our weekly coffee meetings, a new tradition we'd established to rebuild trust slowly and carefully. But Marcus always had explanations that sounded reasonable. "Manipulation is designed to sound reasonable," I replied. "That's what makes it effective." My father had taken early retirement to focus on his health and marriage counseling. The stress of his son's criminal behavior had triggered anxiety that required professional treatment, but it also motivated him to examine family patterns that had enabled Marcus's sense of entitlement. I taught him that charm could substitute for responsibility. He admitted during a particularly difficult conversation, "I'm sorry you paid the price for our parenting mistakes." The house felt peaceful in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I'd installed new locks, changed the security codes, and established clear boundaries about visits and communication. My master bedroom was once again my sanctuary, filled with my grandmother's furniture and my own carefully chosen belongings. The guest room had been completely redecorated as a home office, where I could work without memories of betrayal lurking in every corner. Most surprisingly, I discovered strength I never knew I possessed. Standing up to my family's manipulation had been terrifying, but it taught me that I could survive conflict and disappointment. The woman who'd once avoided confrontation at all costs had successfully defended her inheritance against sophisticated criminals who happened to share her DNA. My relationship with Emma had required careful rebuilding. The 4-year-old had been traumatized by her father's arrest and her mother's emotional breakdown, but she gradually came to understand that Aunt Dolores wasn't the villain in this story. Our supervised visits included trips to parks and museums, carefully structured to provide stability without enabling Stephanie's attempts to manipulate my emotions through her daughter's presence. Professional therapy had been essential to processing the psychological impact of my family's betrayal. Learning that people I'd trusted since birth had studied my weaknesses to exploit them required months of counseling to understand and accept. But therapy also helped me recognize that their criminal behavior reflected their character flaws, not my inadequacies as a sister or daughter. 6 months after Marcus's conviction, I received a letter from him that demonstrated genuine remorse rather than tactical apologies designed to manipulate forgiveness. "I know you have no reason to trust anything I say," he wrote, "but I need you to know that I understand what we did was inexcusable. Stephanie and I convinced ourselves we were solving problems, but we were really destroying the person who'd tried to help us. I hope someday I can earn your forgiveness, but I understand if that never happens." The letter meant more to me than any family dinner or holiday celebration we'd shared during my childhood. For the first time in our relationship, Marcus was taking full responsibility for his actions without expecting immediate forgiveness or reconciliation. It wasn't enough to rebuild trust, but it was a foundation for possible healing years in the future. My professional life had also flourished once I was free from the emotional drain of family manipulation. I'd been promoted to senior partner in my financial planning firm, specializing in inheritance protection and estate planning. My experience with real estate fraud had given me expertise that helped other clients protect their assets from similar schemes. Ironically, my family's betrayal had enhanced my career in ways I never could have anticipated. Dating had been complicated by trust issues, but I'd gradually developed a relationship with David the attorney, who'd helped me navigate the criminal case against my brother. He understood the complexities of family dysfunction and respected my need for independence and clear boundaries. Our relationship grew slowly and carefully built on mutual respect rather than dependency or manipulation. The house had also connected me with neighbors I'd never properly met during years of focusing solely on work and family obligations. Mrs. Chen from next door became a close friend who shared gardening tips and homemade cookies. The young couple across the street invited me to barbecues where I could practice social skills without the psychological warfare that had characterized my family interactions. Every morning when I woke up in my grandmother's house, I felt her presence approving of my decisions. She'd valued independence, honesty, and self-respect above family harmony built on enabling dysfunction. By protecting her gift, I'd honored her memory and preserved the sanctuary she'd created for me during her final years. The legal victory had been satisfying, but the personal growth was more valuable than any court judgment. I'd learned to trust my instincts even when they conflicted with family pressure. I discovered that kindness didn't require accepting abuse, and that love didn't mean sacrificing my well-being for other people's poor choices. I learned that family love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for others' greed. Real family respects your boundaries, supports your dreams, and celebrates your success. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. My grandmother's house became more than inheritance. It became the foundation for rebuilding my life with authentic relationships and unshakable self-respect. Standing in my restored bedroom, I realized that protecting my inheritance had been about more than money or property. It had been about protecting my right to make my own choices, to live according to my values, and to build a life based on genuine connection rather than manipulation and guilt. The morning sun streaming through my grandmother's lace curtains reminded me that some gifts are too precious to sacrifice for the comfort of people who don't deserve them. My house was finally mine again, but more importantly, my life was finally my own. Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and protecting yourself from people who claimed to love you, but treated you like a resource to be exploited? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with relatives who used emotional manipulation to get what they wanted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others recognize when they're being taken advantage of by people who should be protecting them instead. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more true family stories about overcoming manipulation and finding strength. Share this video with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves against family members who cross boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships built on respect, not exploitation. May you always have the courage to protect what matters most, even when it means disappointing people who should have protected you first.